Chechnya is an island of Islamic fanaticism in the middle of Vladimir Putin's Russia. Yup, you heard that right. In a country that congratulates itself on being the spiritual shelter of the West, the last bulwark of Christianity, this is a country where you can find the Republic of Chechnya. It's a part of Russia where it is impossible to buy vodka. Oh yes, and I know what you're going to say. Wait a minute, Simon, didn't you just say the Republic of Chechnya? Didn't you say that it was a part of Russia? Well, the truth is, the Russian Federation is territory-wise the biggest country in the world, and that means that their political distribution is really complicated. The biggest part of the country is divided into the so-called oblasts, which are similar to the states in the United States of America. These areas, they have their own governor, they have their own parliament, but they must respect the Russian constitution as well as the Kremlin. However, there are other regions in Russia, the so-called republics, that have way more autonomy. They have their own constitution, they have their own language, and they can even have their own official religion. One of these republics is the Crimean Republic, and despite not being recognized by America or by Europe, it is controlled by Russia. You see, in theory, Russian law guarantees a lot of autonomy. But I say in theory like that because, as you know, Vladimir Putin loves to keep his country under tight control. In fact, almost all of the presidents of the republics belong to Putin's political party, and that would be United Russia. Anytime one of those governors challenges Putin, even just a little, things like this happen.
Tatarstan, the last region to lose its special status under Putin.
Nonetheless, there is a republic that Putin does not dare to bully. Yep, you heard that right. Vladimir Putin, the Chuck Norris of politics, is afraid sometimes too, specifically when it comes to Chechnya.
It is often unclear who rules whom. Russian observers of the region complain that Russian law and authority stops at the Chechnyan border.
For example, in Chechnya, the hijab is promoted by the government. Things like polygamy and even marriages involving minors are actually tolerated. And no restaurant dares to open at daytime during Ramadan season. Nonetheless, all of these things are nothing compared to what some newspapers showed in April of 2017.
Chechnya opens world's first concentration camp for homosexuals.
Yeah, listen, I know. Putin is not exactly the biggest fan of LGBT rights, but opening a gay concentration camp sounds like a bit too much even for him. So the question to be made here is, why doesn't Putin put some order into Chechnya? What is the Chechen president Ramzan Kadyrov's secret to getting Putin to let him do as he pleases? Well, today we are going to answer all of those questions, but before we do, let's take a look back at the history.
The Sicily of the Caucasus.
For centuries, Chechnya was ruled by big clans that had power over specific areas. Those clans, named Tukum in the Chechen language, were composed of hundreds of smaller families, the so-called Teep. For a better understanding, this was pretty similar to the Sicilian mafia system. Everything stayed in the family. And everything was done according to the principles of religion, in this case, Sunni Islam. And the same way the Sicilian mafia resisted all kinds of invasions, the Chechen Tukum system survived the Tsars and even the Soviet Union.
There must be Soviets in public and Muslims in private. Chechnyan proverb.
In other words, during the Soviet era, there were two parallel systems that were running at the same time. On the surface, there was communism, but underground there was a hierarchy of Muslim clans and families. This is why, in the year 1991, when the Soviet Union disappeared, Chechens seized the opportunity and declared the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria. This name might ring a bell with you because it appeared in one of the Call of Duty video games. Now back then, the president of the brand new Russian Federation, that was Boris Yeltsin, and he replied to those rebels with military power.
Yeltsin declares emergency, curfew in Chechen region.
Nevertheless, this state of emergency failed entirely. The Russian army was incapable of stopping the Chechen rebels, and they had to run back home. But not only that, during their retreat, the separatist rebels seized Russian weapons. So for 3 long years, the Kremlin had to put up with Chechnya. But in the year 1994, well, things they changed.
You can build a throne with bayonets, but it's difficult to sit on it. Boris Yeltsin.
So, do you remember what I told you about the political system of Chechnya, which was based on the Tukum clan system? Well, the truth is, those different clans didn't really get on very well with each other, and this was the start of a civil war. A civil war that, to Russianize, was the perfect opportunity to take back control of the republic. However, a year later, the Russian army had lost 6,000 soldiers, and poor Boris Yeltsin had to sign a peace treaty with the separatist and pretty weak government of Chechnya. Meanwhile, many Islamic terrorists from Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan fled to Grozny, the Chechen capital, to recruit new members. A failed state with a tribal system where Islam is the official religion sounds like a pretty great market for recruiting terrorists, doesn't it? Well, in other words, all of this meant that it was just a matter of time before another war began. So this war, it started in 1999 when a group of Islamic rebels invaded a neighboring Russian republic, the Republic of Dagestan. So if making trouble in their own territory wasn't enough, Chechens wanted to attack other parts of Russia. Now, as you might imagine from this, the Kremlin decided to send their troops immediately. But this time it was pretty different. So why was this? Well, despite the fact Boris Yeltsin was the president, this time the prime minister was the one and only, the hero of VisualPolitik, and that would be Vladimir Putin. Well, Putin, he actually went there and he found one of the separatist chiefs, and that would be Mr. Ramzan Kadyrov. So basically, Putin went to this Kadyrov guy and said, "Alright dude, look, I'm gonna shower you in gold, I'm gonna give you as many weapons and as much power as you need. You could do whatever you want there in Chechnya, but there is only one condition. No wars, no terrorism. Alright?" And, as we say here at VisualPolitik, as it was said, well, so it was done. The war, it was over, and Kadyrov used all that help from the Kremlin to destroy the other warlords in the Republic. And now you might be wondering, well, did all of this work? Well, the answer is yes, and sort of also no. Of course, there were no more wars, but many of those other warlords started organizing terrorist attacks in other areas of Russia, including Moscow. In the Moscow case, a terrorist group kidnapped over 300 hostages in a theater. Of those 300 civilians, 170 died. In other words, Putin's plan was far from perfect. And Kadyrov's authority was not taken for granted. In fact, some years later, he would die in another terrorist attack in Grozny. And, well, that was the moment when the main character of this story comes into the picture.
The Instagram star.
Ramzan Kadyrov succeeded his father in power, and he learned a valuable lesson. If you want to start a dictatorship, you better make it big. We are talking about a country full of warlords fighting each other, where Al-Qaeda or Daesh are recruiting people who might challenge Kadyrov's power. In other words, he was not willing to let those weird Western fashions, like democracy or human rights, make him look weak. Besides, he had Putin's support, he had wealth, he had weapons. What more could he possibly ask for?
I owe my life to Putin. If I ever forget this, I am not a man. When I went through a terribly hard time in my life, he helped. He is the most saintly man to me. Ramzan Kadyrov.
The truth is, since Kadyrov came to power, Chechen terrorists in other parts of Russia, well, they've disappeared. But not only that, Al-Qaeda and Daesh militants are disappearing too. Kadyrov's police chases them, expels them from the country with their families, and then burns down their houses. But if this was not enough, Kadyrov's soldiers offered themselves as volunteers for the most dangerous missions in Ukraine. In fact, in order to show his love for Putin, Ramzan Kadyrov organized a military parade at Grozny football stadium. Thousands of soldiers were waving at the Chechen president, ready to die for him.
If Putin tells me to get my army together, I'm ready. Ramzan Kadyrov.
But things, well, they are not as sweet as they might seem. Actually, with that military parade, Kadyrov was giving two messages. One was, "Hey Putin, I'm your buddy." But the other was, "Hey Putin, if you ever stop being my buddy, come and get me. If you dare." Yes, dear viewer, if Vladimir Putin ever wanted to confront his Chechen bestie, it would be complicated to say the least. And there are many signs that this could actually happen. In fact, all of Kadyrov's political foes, they've been murdered regardless of where they were. From journalists living in Moscow to political opponents hiding in St. Petersburg, they've all been killed. So, what does this mean? Well, it means the government of Grozny has its own KGB situated all across the country. And, well, they're happy to use it anytime someone, Chechnyan or not, gets a little bit bothersome. To put it more poetically, well, Putin created Ramzan Kadyrov, and now his creation has become big enough to look him in the eyes. This explains why, unlike other presidents of Russian republics, Kadyrov dares to give his opinion on international affairs. And the Kremlin, they pretend they don't see those horrific gay concentration camps.
Russia backs Chechnya government's denials over killing and torture of gay men.
Meanwhile, Chechnya is getting wealthier and wealthier thanks to Russia. 90% of their wealth comes direct from money transfers from the Kremlin. Kadyrov, he's built a republic where the cult of his personality is almost like a second religion, just surpassed by Islam. His Instagram account, by the way, has over 3 million followers, which is twice as many as the Chechen population. And on this account, you can see the lifestyle of one of the craziest dictators around, and at the same time, the only one that makes Putin afraid. So now the question is, will Vladimir Putin and Ramzan Kadyrov end up clashing? Should the Kremlin try to stop the human rights violations in Chechnya? Well, please leave your answer in the comments section below, and also visit the Reconsider Media podcast, the podcast that provided the vocals in this video that are not mine. Also, don't forget that we publish brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday, so hit that subscribe button and you will not miss a post. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and as always, I'll see you next time.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.